Call us back to order at this time and turn it back over to our manager.
Thank you. At this time, we are on our next item, which is outside agency funding. And we have Emily Moore here with us to present information about those applications that were received and what the recommendation is of the committee that we have.
And I couldn't figure out who Miss Moore was. I got it now.
Miss Emily.
Got it. Wasn't used to that one. Guess in the handouts here.
Yes, you do have handouts. In your packet, you've got a large spreadsheet here, which Emily will talk through, as well as the recommendations.
All right, well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I am here on behalf of the Outside Agency Funding Committee with our recommendation. So, an overview, Nash County has an appointed internal outside agency funding committee. With that committee, we did review the applications that we received, and then we make a recommendation to the county manager. Completed applications were due March 15th, 2024. So this year, there were 4 focus areas for funding. Those were education, workforce, housing, and health and safety. Also this year, we did have minimum amounts allowable and a maximum amount allowable. So for minimum, that was $3,000, and maximum was $35,000. The maximum was set by an internal committee. Taken into account when we set that was the total amount of funding allocated for outside agency funding, the number of applications typically received, and also the amount of funding that's historically awarded to the different agencies. So on here, this is your 5-year history of outside agency funding. So this does not have the amounts requested or recommended for fiscal year 2025. This is just looking at historically what we have funded. Of these agencies, 10 have applied for funding in fiscal year 2025. With the committee, when we were looking at which agencies to award and how much to award, we did have a scoring rubric. So I know it's teeny tiny, but I will review what the different columns are. The first column was just the fiscal year 2025 agency and program, so who was requesting the funding. The next column was funding area, and those areas again were the education, workforce, housing, and health and safety. The next 3 columns were looking at previous funding, so that's fiscal years 2022 through 2024, so how much previously had we funded each of these agencies. After that is fiscal year 2025, the funding request, how much were these agencies requesting, and then the program budget. So including what they were requesting, how much does the overall budget, or how big is the overall budget for that program? The next 6 columns were the columns that do have points assigned to them. So for the rubric, the maximum rubric score was 24 points. Each of these 6 columns could be awarded anywhere between 1 and 4 points. The first one is funding request, not more than 50% of budget. So with that one, what we were looking at was, is the program sustainable? Do they have other sources of funding? And did they rely solely on Nash County funding? A 1 was not demonstrated, 2, small impact, 3, moderate impact, and 4, significant impact. Then we looked at whether or not the request aligned with the agency mission. So a 1 would have been not aligned, 2, loosely related, 3, closely aligned, and 4 was the primary agency mission. The third column that received points was the request aligns with the agency capability. So 1 was that the agency had no experience with the program or delivery model. 2 was some experience with program or delivery model. 3, some experience with program and delivery model. And 4 was significant experience with both the program and the delivery model. Collaborative efforts associated with program and service. So do they have other partners that they work with? 1 point was for individual agency effort. 2 was minor collaboration. 3, meaningful collaboration. And 4 was significant collaboration. We looked at the demonstrated impact of the program and outcomes from previous years. 1 was no demonstrated or measurable impact. 2 was small impact. 3, moderate impact. And 4, significant impact. And then finally, the last one that had points was the degree that it augmented or filled a Nash County gap in service. So 1 was that it duplicated a Nash County service. 2, it provided optional service not offered by Nash County. 3, it improves outcomes for an existing Nash County service. And 4 was that it provides a mandatory service not provided by Nash County. So we did receive 12 completed applications. With these, if the full amount that was requested was awarded for each one, it was a total of over $300,000. So many of these were not awarded the full amount that they asked for, just because there wasn't enough funding allocated to award every single person the full amount. In fiscal year 2024, we awarded $162,860. This year, we were looking at an allocation of approximately $168,885, and that was because we took into account the Consumer Price Index. So for each of these, I'll go over the amount that they requested, the amount that the committee recommended, and I do have a short summary on what each of the programs is, and also an explanation on why we came up with that recommendation. So for the first one, Down East Partnership for Children, the program was the Family Resource Center. The Family Resource Center serves as a hub for family, child care, and community supports with indoor and outdoor play space. It provides support and referrals to programs, play and learn group for children who are not in formal care, and its target group is children in poverty, children who are from a single-parent family, or children that are under 5 who are currently in family, friend, or neighbor care while their parents are at work. So this year, they requested $20,000. That is a slight increase from their request last year, which was $15,000. The committee recommends $18,500. This recommendation was made based on the program supports or enhances early education and is not duplicative. The program is sustainable and very well established, and they have strong partnerships. The next one is Peacemakers of Rocky Mount with the Freedom School. So this one also falls underneath the education category. Freedom School provides a 6-week intensive academic enrichment program that focuses on reading, children with social and emotional learning experiences, and gives parents the tools and support to support children academically. It also provides participant meals. This program targets low-income elementary and middle school students and has priority placement for students that were referred through the juvenile court counselor, school social workers, DSS, students that are homeless, and children with an incarcerated parent. This year, they did request $25,000, which is an increase from their request last year. Last year, they did request $10,000. We recommended $18,500, and that is because, like the Down East Partnership for Children, they do show that they are a program that enhances education and is not duplicative. The program is sustainable and very well established, and they also have strong partnerships. Next is the Boys and Girls Club of the Tar River region, and the program is the Formula for Impact. The Boys and Girls Club Formula for Impact provides club members with an annual educational enrichment opportunities, including 1 hour of homework assistance each day during the school year. They also provide year-round tutoring, mentoring, and access to educational resources. Club members also receive annual healthy lifestyle enrichment opportunities. It targets ages 5 through 18, especially if they are struggling academically or if they are from areas of high unemployment, dropout rate, juvenile crime, or teenage pregnancy. Like the two before it, we felt that they had the program was sustainable, it is very well established, it does enhance education and is not duplicative, and has strong partnerships. Unlike the two before it, it has the largest program budget of any of the ones that we received. So because of this, we recommended $25,000. Up next is the Spalding Family Resource Center. So the Spalding Family Resource Center, its services include hosting the Spring Hope Library, the Down East Partnership for Children Play and Learn program, Nash Community College High School Equivalency program, Nash Community College's Digital Learning and Basic Computer program. It has physical fitness classes and senior activities. It targets a group with diverse incomes, ages, ethnicities, and abilities. With the Spalding Family Resource Center, they did request $35,000. However, we felt that this program, it is duplicative of services that are offered in Nash County, and it does primarily host programs that are offered and or funded through other agencies. However, they do collaborate very well with many agencies in the area, and they were primarily asking for operational funds versus a specific program. So we did recommend that Spalding gets $10,000. Also, they did recently receive, I think at the end of March, a $1 million grant was presented to them from U.S. Representative Don Davis. So they did just get a very large grant to help with some of their requests that they were asking for. The next two on the list are new requests. These are not ones that we have seen before. So the Ripple Effects Group and the After-School Program. The After-School Program, let me find my paper. Okie dokie. The After-School Program, it did pilot in January 2023. It incorporates active learning, social and emotional learning, STEAM activities, and mental health wellness for elementary students who are not performing well in a traditional classroom setting. It targets students who are struggling, primarily students who have been suspended. It also targets parents who need support for students with special needs and or disciplinary challenges, and teachers who require additional or specialized assistance for students. With this program, we felt that it did enhance education, it was not duplicative, and that it targets a unique population that differs from the other educational programs. However, it is a relatively new program, so the agency has been around, but the program did pilot in 2023. So for this reason, we recommended $7,500 to the Ripple Effects Group. Casa Azul de Wilson, that is also a relatively new program. The agency has been around, but we have not seen a request from them before. So the program is the Education Equity, which is a mentorship program for high school students to mentor middle school students. The mentorship program is to ensure that Latino students do not fall behind in reading comprehension and writing skills. Latino families often face challenges in supporting children with homework and literacy due to language barriers. This program targets bilingual students, middle and high school Latino students, and students from low-income families that cannot afford tutoring. With this program, or with this agency, historically 25% of their students are from Nash County. This program does target a unique population from other education programs, and it enhances education. However, it is a relatively new program. So for this one, we also recommended $7,500. Our next one is the Tri-County Industry. So this one fell under workforce. The first ones were all education. We are now onto workforce. TCI Workstay Program is a long-term program for individuals with significant intellectual disabilities, including autism. The program provides transportation and engages clients in meaningful activities and work. The target is Nash, Edgecombe, and Halifax County individuals with significant intellectual disabilities. With Tri-County Industries, they did request $42,000, which historically is the amount that we have awarded them. But this year, with the max being $35,000, that is what we have recommended. That recommendation was made based on TCI providing services that are otherwise unmet in the county. It is very well established. It targets a unique population, and it has very strong partnerships. United Community Ministries. This fell under the housing category. The program is House the Children, and it provides transitional housing to homeless families, services to eliminate barriers which cause homeless situations, and on-site educational opportunities. It targets homeless families and children, homeless families in Nash and Edgecombe County, and very low-income homeless families. United Community Ministries, they did request $30,000, and we recommended $30,000. This recommendation was based on them providing services that are otherwise unmet in the county. They are well established. They target a unique population, and they also have very strong partnerships. Christian Fellowship Home of Nash and Edgecombe County. This one also falls underneath the housing category. The Christian Fellowship Home provides safe, sober, transitional living for members who are either recovering from substance abuse and or are honorably discharged homeless veterans. It provides recovery programs and transportation assistance to job interviews, medical appointments, legal appointments, etc. The home for individuals recovering from substance abuse opened in 1975. The home for homeless veterans opened in 2016. It targets local men who are recovering from substance abuse and homeless veterans who are honorably discharged. This program provides services otherwise unmet in the county. It is very well established. It targets a unique population and has strong partnerships. Christian Fellowship, they did request $6,860, and we recommended $6,860. The Mercer Foundation. This fell into the health and safety category. The Mercer Foundation equips disabled veterans with necessary tools, education, and vocational training. They also provide balanced meals for children in high-risk environments. What they have specifically asked for is the Children's Feeding Program, and that distributes free lunches to 40 children during summer months. The target for the Children's Feeding Program is Nash and Edgecombe Counties' low-income children and their families. The Mercer Foundation was first awarded last year, so that was the first time that the outside agency funding has awarded them. This year, they have requested $24,000, and we have recommended $5,000. Last year, they were awarded $3,000. With that recommendation, we did find that the Children's Feeding Program is duplicative of other programs available in the county, whereas some of their other services, they are less duplicative. So we suggest that they do revise their scope to either incorporate some of the food pantry aspect, the veterans aspect, but we did recommend the $5,000, and they do have very strong partnerships. Strategic Twin Counties, and the program is Students at Work. Students at Work is designed to bridge gaps between the classroom and workplace skills. With this program, the target is underrepresented students who most likely live in poverty and with few resources. It focuses on opportunity youth who are ages 16 to 24 years old, who are disconnected from school or unemployed. The Strategic Twin Counties, they requested $24,999. We have recommended $5,000. That recommendation is based on the program is similar to some other programs available in the county for workforce training, such as those through NC Works, Nash Community College, and the Nash County Public Schools Work-Based Learning Program. It is a relatively new program because it did pilot during the last year. But Strategic Twin Counties has very strong partnerships, and the agency has been, is well established. And finally, United Way, the 211 Information and Referral Program. This is a free phone line online referral program that helps connect citizens with services. It targets all citizens in Nash County. It's actually available in all 100 counties. And it is particularly used by low to moderate income or elderly. United Way Tar River did request $5,000, and the committee has recommended to not fund this program. United Way has very strong partnerships, including Nash County. And the usage of this particular program has been ticking down since the conclusion of COVID-19. So in their application, they did put that the usage of this program is going down. It is also duplicative to a newer program, the NC Care 360 program. So for that reason, we did not recommend funding the 211 Information and Referral Program. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
I see here that my sister's house, Hope Initiative, and STEP, no funding at all. Did they request any?
My sister's house did not. We did not receive an application for them. Who were your other ones? You said STEP?
STEP.
Now, is that the Strategic Twin Counties? Is that STEP? Okay. STEP, they did request it. So they requested the $24,999,
Yeah,
and we recommended $5,000.
I got you.
Last year, I believe they also requested $24,999, and no funding was approved last year.
I see the Boys and Girls Club requested $40,000, and you recommended $25,000.
Yes, sir.
There's a reason for that.
Yes, so with the Boys and Girls Club.
I heard you what you stated earlier, but I still ask the question, is there a reason for it?
With the Boys and Girls Club, we did recommend funding them more than any of the other education ones, just because they did have the largest program budget, and we did feel like they were well established and had strong partners. So they were recommended a higher amount than any of the other education groups. And the 25,000 is relatively in line with previous amounts funded. We did fund them $25,000 fiscal year 2024, 2023. I believe in 2022 and 2021, they were down at $12,500. So it is in line with their previous ones and higher than the other recommended education categories.
Mr. Chairman. Oh, you finished reading?
The Spalding Family Resource Center, I was looking at the history of I think we've been averaging, what, about 24,000 over a several-year period. And this time they requested 35, you reduced them to 10, recommended 10.
Yes.
Did y'all take a look at the impact of that program in the area?
So with Spalding, they were asking more so for operational cost than asking for funding for a specific program.
Okay.
So we did prioritize funding programs versus operational cost. Spalding also, the majority of their programs that they were requesting were they were more hosting programs, which is fantastic to host those programs in that area. So we did still recommend $10,000. But the majority of the programs they had listed were programs that were being funded and put on by another agency. We were also aware that they had just received a very large grant to assist them in some of their operational budgeting.
So we took on only one new one for this fiscal year budget?
2 of them. So both the Ripple Effects Group and the Casa Azul de Wilson, those were both new programs, established agencies, but new programs, and they do both fall underneath the education category.
How many programs or agencies requested funds other than this?
That's it. Those are all of the completed.
This is it?
Yes, sir. We received 12 completed applications.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask Emily, the asterisk by the Mercer Foundation, is that because of the recommendations you all gave and you wanted to bring attention to it, or is something missing?
No, so that was, the Mercer Foundation is the one that we did recommend that they revise their scope, which each of these, if they were awarded a lower amount than what they asked for, they will send an updated spending plan. But with that one specifically, we were asking for a revised scope to maybe use it towards either their food pantry or towards one of their veterans programs, just because we felt that summertime school lunches, there are numerous routes within Nash County already that do that sort of program, so it was relatively duplicative.
And that was fine. Like I said, I saw the asterisk, but I didn't see anything at the bottom that said what the asterisk was for, and usually it's at the bottom of the paper. So
That would have been handy.
I just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Other questions from the commission?
Just a couple of basic questions. The Ripple Effect Group, what's the location that they operate out of?
I believe, let's see, I brought my applications just in case. Let's see, so Ripple Effects, they did list a P.O. box there in Rocky Mount, is their P.O. box. Now that,
They
they're
just
not
gave
necessarily
P.O.
housed
box?
there, but their P.O. box is in Rocky Mount.
They didn't give a physical address.
Sort of. So they've got 2 different locations. One is on Sunset Avenue, and one is on Forest Hill Avenue. Both are in Rocky Mount.
Okay. Now, this is Casa is in Wilson?
Yes.
That location?
They are located in Wilson.
In Wilson. I
So,
have to ask the question. How did the committee come up with the decision to fund an agency that was outside of Nash County?
okay, so we do have several of these that work in numerous counties, including the Tri-County Industries does numerous counties.
Yep.
The United Community Ministries is numerous counties. So with the Casa Azul de Wilson, since historically 25% of their students are Nash County students and they will partner with Nash County Public School System, we felt that they still serve Nash County.
Yeah, all the other agencies that you mentioned, they are located in Nash County, even though they serve some other. They were located in another county. That's the difference between the two. That's why I was asking the question. You know, I heard you say they serve 25%.
County is located in another county.
Tri-County is still located in Rocky Mountain.
I believe they're in Edgecombe.
So Atlantic Avenue and Edgecombe.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, agencies that serve citizens in Rocky Mountain, in Nash County, are eligible to apply for our funding.
Yes.
Okay. All right, the last one, what's the location of the Christian Fellowship Group?
On the corner of Grace and Western Avenue. At
Let's
the
see.
corner of Grace and Western Avenue.
Okay, all right.
Okay, all right, well, I'll say, it sounds like that one's been answered.
Okay, that's some question.
Any other questions for Emily?
I would just say, I won't speak for the board, but I'll speak for myself. I know we worked through this process earlier in the year and came up with a new way to administer it, and it appears to have worked very well. Appears you have done a great job leading the effort to do that and had answers for every question that we had. So I'm very pleased with how y'all structure this and how it comes back to us. My understanding is that it is in the hands of the committee and the manager and not in the hands of the Board of Commissioners. But I think it's worked well.
It will be part of the recommended budget for the board to consider. And so if we receive any feedback from you all, it will be taken into consideration. And Emily, I thank you very much for leading this process. I think you did an excellent job of providing the board with your criteria and given a summary of what the agencies do. I think that's very important for our board members to understand what these agencies do that we provide funding to. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can we do her hand?
Yeah, we can clap for her. Oh, we didn't clap for Donna. No, I'm just kidding.
She stayed at her seat.
This is true.
Well, it's a new venture for us, and
Yes.
I think it's been handled very well.
Yeah, she did a great job. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the Capitol. We spoke a little bit about this earlier, but Jonathan is going to lead us through the Capitol that was requested and what is being recommended. Obviously, what you see on a slide here, maybe you can see it, but you do have a handout in front of you that has that information for you as well. So I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to follow Donald Wood's lead, and I'm going to sit right here unless you need me to go to the podium. But the one-page handout you have is the same thing you have on the screen. I just tried to make it a little bit larger on the screen for those that would be attending and did not have the hard copies of the handout. And in reviewing the capital request we had for this upcoming budget year, certainly all of you have seen this list during the small group meetings, and I'll be glad to revisit any of the projects you'd like to discuss. But the main thing I was going to focus on initially is what we have included in the current draft of the recommended budget that we shared with you earlier when Donna reviewed the revenues and the manager reviewed the recommended or the current expenditures that have been included in the numbers that you have been provided. So we've, as you will recall, for our FY25 request, we had a total request just over $6.2 million. And as was referenced in the presentation from Davenport and Associates, and I think we've referenced a couple other times, we are looking to leverage some of the interest that is accrued on the ARPA funds that the county received to the tune of $1,050,000. And then we have used $830,000 of county funds for PAYGO for this current list of projects. And again, that's where we are today, and certainly we'll be interested in your feedback. But I just want to review those that we have currently shortlisted to include in next year's budget. And the first one you'll see is the network server and storage solution for MIS, $378,000. We're recommending to fully fund that, and in discussions with our MIS director, she certainly thinks that is a very important project and a much-needed project for the county to fund in the upcoming year. Next project you see is the Laserfish upgrade, $25,000, fully funded. And that is a system used by multiple departments at the county, and we're looking to upgrade that system to increase its functionality for those three departments. Computer replacement, $90,000 was requested. At present, we are recommending funding $42,150. But we recognize with all these capital projects, as the numbers may change a little bit, we may have some additional funding available to go towards that particular project. But right now, we've recommended a number a little less than half of what was requested. Third project you'll see is the HVAC controls replacement at the administrative building. We have completed the work on the first floor. We're in the process of completing the work on the second floor of the administrative building. And this would be the third stage in that project. And the controls that we have are original to the building. And as we've discussed before, those parts are getting harder and harder to replace, become obsolete. And that's why we're recommending that we complete that project next year to the tune of $200,000. The fifth project you see is HVAC mechanical replacements. That is funds, and you'll see, if you look out beyond FY25, you'll see funds every year that we use to fund the replacement of those units that are reaching the end or have reached the end of their useful life. So we've got some funds to draw on for that purpose. The next project we come to is in the Sheriff's Office. Initially, they had requested funding for 18 vehicles at a unit cost roughly of $58,500. We are recommending at this stage of the budget development that we include $198,000. We've had some conversations with the Sheriff's Department about that issue. And I also want to remind you that the county received $420,000 from state-directed grant that we used to purchase vehicles. So we were going to supplement that with 3 additional vehicles. And again, that is based on guidance we received from the Sheriff's Office. And also is certainly a function of their current staffing levels. And they've got vehicles that are sitting. So we may see a larger request in future years. But at this point, the Sheriff's Office was comfortable with the $420,000 we received from the state and supplementing that with an additional $198,000. The next item we have there in the Sheriff's Office is a Penleak server. That is a server that we understand is reaching the end of its useful life, and support will no longer be available, so it's time to replace that particular item. So we recommended fully funding that request. So moving down, next project we come to is ambulance replacements and emergency services. They had initially requested replacing 2 ambulances. At this point, we are recommending replacing 1 ambulance in the FY25 budget. And that is also, by the way, one of the projects that we would recommend funding with the ARPA interest money. They had also requested a replacement for one of their quick response vehicles. Actually, they requested 2, and at this point, we were recommending that we fund 1 at $75,000. The department had also requested funding to purchase 15 ventilators that will be used on ambulances responding to calls, and we're recommending that be fully funded and also paid for with ARPA interest dollars. Soil and Water had requested funds that will be supplemented by a grant to purchase a seeder and a trailer to haul that unit. that could be used by the agricultural community, and we were recommending that we fully fund that request. Department of Social Services had 2 vehicles coming up for replacement, they requested 2 vehicles. At this point, we are recommending that one of those vehicles be funded in the upcoming budget. Next 3 items are all items that were included in the second phase of the Miracle Park project and are required as a condition of the grant that we received from the Parks Recreation Trust Fund. So you see the event stage, the dog park, which is primarily fencing and some shade structures, and a volleyball court. So we're recommending all 3 of those projects be funded at the amounts more or less requested. We have reduced the volleyball court a little bit. And honestly, I don't know if that's a revised number that Thomas had provided. Can you help me with that? Do you know?
We were just working through some projects at this point, and we think we can lower that cost at this point.
It will be fully funded. And then the last project you'll see on the list there is detention facility capital. With the funds that were set aside for the work for the jail renovation and expansion project, we have more or less consumed all of those funds, and we anticipate change orders through the balance of this fiscal year, one of which the board approved at their meeting earlier this month, change order 11. And I know there's some additional change orders that are in process. So I'd had a conversation with the sheriff based on some guidance I received from the Commissioner's Capital Project Committee and the county manager. And the sheriff agreed to allow us to draw down some funds from the $5 million state-directed grant that the county received, with the understanding that we would replace that funding in the upcoming budget. So right now we've requested $250,000 in order to replenish the funds that will be used through the remainder of this year. And if that number is less, we'll adjust accordingly. But right now, that's our best guess. So again, that brings us to a total of $1,880,000. Again, the initial request was a little over $6.2 million. So we have reduced the request by $4.3 million. With that, I'll pause and see if there's any questions about any of the projects that we have currently recommended for funding.
Sheriff's Department, so you said you spoke with the necessary people you need to there, including the sheriff, and the amount for the vehicles, the number of vehicles, and then the PenLink server, that is all we're going to fund for them this year?
That is all that we have included right now in our recommended budget, because again, we were trying to get our budget to where our revenues and expenditures were a lot closer than the $17 million differential that we started with back in the end of March. And the manager's going to discuss some things that we could add back to the budget if there was an appetite for increasing revenue. But where we stand today, yes, ma'am, there's basically 3 projects for the sheriff's office. The 3 vehicles, again, plus the $420,000 in state-directed grant, which is funding coming to the county, the PenLink server, and then the $250,000 for the jail project.
Comments?
So the other thing I'll say, and again, Davenport talked a little bit about this, trying to step up our funding available for county PAYGO moving forward. We did encourage our departments this year to think a little bit more about future needs, and that's also what we've tried to convey in this handout is needs in future years. Again, if we move forward with the projects that we've recommended funding today, that still leaves $4.3 million in projects that in all likelihood you will see again next year. And then you already see that in the ensuing 4 years of the CIP, we've got about $13.9 million in project requests. So if we take the $4.3 million that we're deferring from this year to some future year, and we add that to the $13.9 million that you also have on your handout here, you'll see a total unmet need in future fiscal years of $18.3 million. So I just want to make you aware of that number because we'll be talking about it again next year. Regardless of what decision we make this year, a lot of these projects will show up again next year. So we'll just give you some sense of what the future holds for us as we're making budget decisions.
Mr. Boone, looking at that number rolling across sideways from 26 to 29, and even in the future years, what is the thought process of administration of where that funding is going to come from?
Well, that's one of the things that we would like to engage the board and get your thoughts on, because any revenue received comes from the board.
Could we at a minimum, see how to properly say this, if indeed we get into a budget year from the state like we have just incurred, where there were quite a bit of extra revenue, and even though I did read it just yesterday that the revenues at the state were decreasing in a small amount, but could we ask our departments in making requests to local appropriations to work off of this list, so we would be filling those needs that we have identified, and maybe even contact our legislative members and let them know that the county has a list of future needs, and we'd like for them to consider this list if money is available in the future when they think about awarding things. In a few cases this year, we had funding coming in that administration may not have known about, whereas if we could concentrate the department heads and offices to work off of this list and get it to the General Assembly, hopefully we could get more in tune with what our needs are for future revenue coming in that revenue source. Does that
Right.
make any sense?
Yes, sir. As you indicated, again, we were fortunate enough to receive some grant funds this past year from the state based on conversations that some departments had with some of our elected representatives. And I know that Representative Chesser has reached out to our office, has also reached out to the sheriff's office, and has also reached out to emergency services to have those conversations. From administration, the projects we had shared with Representative Chesser's office was a Southern Ash Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant. Of course, that's a big project that you do not see on this list.
Yes.
And some other infrastructure-related items specifically related to the NC 97 Industrial Park. Congressman Davis's office had also reached out to us. We'd shared some similar information with them. The other two projects we had included, at least in the information we shared with Congressman Davis's office, was a senior center and the Nash Arts project for consideration. But yes, I would hesitate a little bit to just make a carte blanche statement about departments reaching out to our elected representative, but certainly working from a list that we've already kind of worked through.
Sure.
I think would be helpful because these are what I think we all collectively agree are our most pressing needs. So I certainly agree with that, and also leveraging the resources we have in grants and intergovernmental affairs as far as trying to find revenues or resources to meet some of these needs. So yeah, I think that's a point well taken.
And even when we do our next legislative dinner, if we could discuss this list some at that venue as well.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Jonathan? Okay. As you can see, we have, again, a lot of requests, and currently, with the budget that's in place, there will be a lot of unmet needs, so we will continue to work through this. Next, we have a little discussion about our fire districts. We just want to let the board know where we are. You have in your packet information about the fire districts and their revenue neutral tax rate. Unfortunately, we have a process every year that actually kicks off in the beginning of the year in February, where Finance sends information to the fire chiefs about the development of their budget. And this year, we we sent that information out and did not yet have the revenue neutral tax rate. So I've also included in here just a copy of a letter that's planned to go out this afternoon to all of our fire chiefs, letting them know that we need for them to revisit the budgets that they have submitted, looking at that revenue neutral tax rate and the revenue that it generates versus their current tax rate. And you can see the paperwork that will go along with the letter. And just as in years past, if they wish to have the tax rate different from that revenue neutral rate, then we will be asking them to provide a letter of justification for the board to consider with the adoption of the budget. So we wanted to just kind of let everybody know. I know a number of you have heard from fire chiefs and understand that we've have a situation on our hands right now, but hopefully we're working through it, and we will be communicating with them via this letter that'll go out today. And I apologize, up there it says that their modified budgets are due the 1st of May, but in the letter, we've actually moved that to the 8th of May. So they've got some time to consider that revenue neutral rate and any rate in between revenue neutral and where they are now, to send some communication back to the county about what their needs are. Any questions?
I'm understanding, whatever their rate is set at right now, if they don't do anything, their rate's gonna stay the same as it is right now.
If they don't request a change, no.
That is correct. If they don't request a change, then the board would approve, the board still has to approve the rate for the current year, but if they don't ask for a change, that would be their request.
For example, if their rate's 10 cents right now,
That's
and with their
their
new
request.
evaluation, if they don't request any change, it's gonna stay 10 cents.
If the board approves that.
If
So
the
it's
board
up to the board in adopting the budget to approve that rate. But what we are asking, just so the board has some reference, if they're asking for their current rate or some rate in between, we're just asking for a brief explanation. So as you're approving the budget and looking at approval of the budget, you would take that into consideration.
Well, same as always, they've had to justify their rate and what they're gonna
Exactly.
spend their money for. Yeah, okay, all right.
So it's not that their rates are not going to revert to revenue neutral.
Not revert, but again, it's part of the approval process. In approving the budget ordinance, those numbers are included in there. So it will not revert.
So, but anything between revenue neutral and where they are now, since all of those rates did change for a revenue neutral rate, they would need to send justification for leaving the rate where it is, or anywhere in between.
Anyway, just don't want to get it mixed up that they're understanding that the county's going to change their rate to a revenue neutral rate just because they get that letter.
No.
Okay, all right.
I just got a comment that asked that y'all make sure that the communication is conveyed to those departments, being that you're asking them to respond in less than a month's time. And most of them have boards that meet, like a regular membership meeting, and then also board of directors meetings. And, you may or may not have hit those meeting deadlines for those departments. So it is going to be it's going to be a time crunch for them, and just make sure that they receive this communication.
Okay.
Mailing out the letters. And if there's any question, hopefully they will reach out to me and I can answer any questions. And again, as I say in my letter, I apologize for getting ahead of the process. And I didn't mean to create complications or misunderstanding. But it is a different year. We haven't had a reval for 7 years, and the process changed a little bit, and I got ahead of it. So I apologize to all the fire districts and the commissioners for the misunderstanding and the massive amount of communications I'm sure you've received recently.
And I just looked back, Tony Cameron's in the room, so I'll just ask for his assistance in reaching out to those fire chiefs so that we can make sure if they have any kind of a conflict with the date. Thank you.
But I do want to add one thing that we want to point out to, there's, even with going with the revenue neutral or somewhere in between, there will be an increase in what they're looking at just because of the increase in their base. And so we just wanted to point that out. So if they'll definitely take a look at their budgets from last year, the information from last year, they'll see that what we're providing, it will show that they're increasing, even with the revenue neutral. Something for consideration.
Do the rest of the commissioners think we're going about this right? Do the rest of you think we're handling this right with where we are? Because I've got some concern with saying that the rate doesn't change unless they tell us to change. I see no rates changing. But I don't know how else to handle it, quite frankly.
Leave it up to them. I mean, if they can justify the same rate they've got, that they have now, with their expenditures, then it's up to them.
You think, Dan, it's clear enough for them to understand that's where we are? Or should we be basing it off in
This,
revenue versus tax rate?
yeah, I mean, that's what they figured on a tax rate. I don't see why that should get them confused.
Say that again?
I don't see why that should get them confused. I mean, they know they're basing it on 10 cent or 12 cent or whatever their current rate is.
All right.
They got to justify their expenditures to justify that rate. So if they do that, then they can handle it that way, right, Tony?
What'd you say?
Yes, sir, I would say.
Okay.
Well, here's what I would say. Go ahead. You got something? What I would say is that's their decision to make that judgment, and it's our decision as to whether or not to support that judgment. But if you're just looking at needs, if they can justify those needs, then we could justify as a board leaving our tax rate at 6.7. Would we do that? I don't think so. And I think it's not really appropriate to just take that windfall of money with this revaluation and add that burden to the citizens of Nash County. I think somewhere between neutral and current rate, that's what we're looking at, and I think they should be strongly encouraged to look at that same logic.
Well, my comment is that the fire district assess the citizens off of real property value, same rate. I mean, it's off real property value. So when we set up a property rate, the assessment that they do is added on to the property rate that we set for each district. So as I've always said before, everybody in the county is not paying the same tax rate because of the tax district that you live in, and the fire districts get funding off a real property tax. So revenue neutral, and actually, like I said, if they stay at the rate that they are now, with the reevaluation, the taxpayers are going to pay a whole lot more than they have. So those things got to be in consideration so that the citizens that live in certain fire districts that not as well off as others would not be burdened with paying the highest tax rate in the county because of the fire district that they live in. So we got to have some conscientious fairness about those tax rates that we assign to the fire district. That's my basic comment about that.
Mr. Outlaw?
Yeah, I just wanted to just clarify one thing. Whatever my chief's request, I'm going to support it. If they request the full amount, I'm going to support it. But I just use my one department as an example. At revenue neutral, and you correct me if my number's wrong, at revenue neutral, they're at about 508 is their current, and revenue neutral with anticipated growth is going to take them to an income of 553. So that's over an 8.5% increase at revenue neutral. If they take it to the full amount, it's going to be over a 25% increase in their spending. Now, that's a lot of increase. To me, it is anyway. But again, I'm going to support what my chiefs asked for. But I think that's a little bit excessive to ask for 25% plus in 1 year, because future years are coming and their max is 15. And when they get to 15, that's when it's going to get rough.
Need to recognize,
Go ahead, sir.
I think we also need, as we look at this, recognize that each fire district is different. Some have a much larger population than others. And that's going, revenue there, regardless, whatever their tax rate, is going to be based on the resources that are there for that particular tax rate. And so I can't see where all of them, all the fire districts can get the same thing.
You're saying you don't think that all the fire districts should be the same rate? Say again.
I have heard that they all ought to be getting the same thing, but each district is different. And some districts have more resources than others. Some are more rural than others. And so even though they are outside of municipalities, most of them, the revenue is going to be different.
Well, I don't think there's anybody in the room that doesn't agree that we get more out of our volunteer fire departments than any other thing that's in the county. That's just a given. And we get a lot from them for the cost that we put in it. But, Mr. Arrington, to your point, I understand what you're saying, but based on revenue, you have more liability to cover that also. For instance, if you take one of your fire districts versus Ruddock, which you have some of that territory as well, because the total assessed value is much higher there, the risk involved in what they got to protect is also higher. So to say that it's all should be the same rate wouldn't necessarily work totally, because the risk isn't the same, that risk to value. But, you know, I'm not in we don't need to get in a total discussion on that today. You made your points very clear moving along, and I certainly understand those. But on this point right here, I do think we would be much better off to address these fire departments based on income rather than tax rate. Because if we go at it like we're doing here, I know what the results is going to be at the end of the day. They're going to all keep the tax rates the same, and our citizens are going to suffer because of it. Whereas if we would work it along the revenue that they currently have to justify an increase in revenue and just leave the word rate out of it, I think we could serve our citizens better, is my thought. Does anybody see my point?
Yeah.
We get better results from that. I think example Wayne just gave, if we show talk about the numbers rather than the rate, because everybody doesn't do the number crunching that finance does, or some of us on this board do. But when you talk about what dollars they're gonna get, yes, they're gonna understand it better. So,
I'm thinking that this information we're sending to them is going to show them what they're currently getting, what the revenue neutral rate will generate for them, and what their current tax rate will generate for them. And they've got the opportunity to figure out how much money we need next year based on these figures, which may be less than our fire tax we're charging now. It may be a revenue neutral rate. It could be less than revenue neutral rate, but they got a budget to work with. So I think bottom line is their dollars, and that's what they should work on. And I'm sure they won't say, well, we're gonna keep it at 10 cents or 12 cents, and we get all this extra money so we can find somewhere to spend it. You know, I would hope they're doing their budget responsibly.
I hope you're right. And my
think I am.
concern is the fact, had we sent this out first, I would agree with you 100%. But what we sent out first showed something different from this and showed the new revenue that they're gonna get. And I'm thinking they have based that budget on the new revenue they are expecting, and now they'll think, the comments I'm hearing is they're thinking that we are reducing the revenue from what we sent out to start with, which is not factual. That's not what we're doing. I just wish we'd had it in a better format to start with, but I feel like maybe we can get it corrected if we talk more about revenue than we talk about tax rate, but that's just my thinking.
I think the letter should be customized to the department. So for my departments, one of them, tell them this is what you currently receive at this tax levy. This is what you will receive at the revenue neutral rate, which is a 8.5% increase, and state that. And say, if you choose to go to the current rate, then your revenue will go up by X amount. Show them the amount and the percent. Because I think what you got here is and I don't know this for fact, but you've got debt with vehicles, and here's an opportunity to increase the payoff of those vehicles. So I'm just concerned that for future years, as this 13 or 12 or whatever it is moves to the 15, then what happens then? And there's a lot of some of these departments are approaching that 15 cents. Actually, I think one of them may already be at it. So what do you do without the General Assembly changing the statute? I just think they don't have a clear understanding as to what they will receive at revenue neutral, and then that includes the anticipated growth.
The customized letter will solve the problem.
I think that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
So you had three pieces. You had three pieces that are going to go out to them. That second page, we will modify that so that the boxes that show the revenue neutral rate and what it generates, as well as their current rate and what it generates, and make sure that they've got those numbers.
I think that'll get it there.
And this should have been what they got to start with, because they had quite a misunderstanding about what they got the other day.
I think they all and us understand that now.
I'm going to call.
They do, if they got their figures.
Explain it to them.
Yep.
And I'm going to tell him, if you think you need a 25% plus increase, then I'm not going to not support you. But I need you to think about that. Do you need all of that money now, or you have needs in the future that might necessitate that money more?
And in our case, Marvin, we share a department in Brattleboro. They didn't get an increase, so it's a non-issue with that particular one. And we share another one, Red Oak, where it is a potential issue. So
Well, it's absolutely a misnomer to think they're taking a budget cut. Even at revenue neutral, they're not taking a budget cut.
I think you understand.
No, they don't understand that.
When they see these figures right here,
That's going to help.
Yeah, but
They'll
but they've
understand
already
that. I
seen
mean-
something, and they've got this perception that their budgets are being cut. And yeah, they might be cut from the current rate, 25% plus increase, but they're not being cut. Actually, they're the same or they're going up. Revenue neutral is not a cut. At worst, it's flat.
Okay.
Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, one last statement. So, first of all, I'm not criticizing the fire departments. They really have, they are not the problem. The problem is our old system, and our old system that created this disparity between 18 different fire departments. So when we set the property rate for the county, 18 different areas of our county pay 18 different property tax rates because it's added on like it's 67 cents now. So you gotta add that 67 plus that 11 cents or that 15 cent. So everybody's paying a different tax rate. So I've always talked about how can we some kind of way eventually change the system. I know it's so hard to change a system where there's some where everybody is closer to the equal basic wage where everybody's paying the same tax rate. Now, what we'll talk about, the revenue neutral, that yes, the fire departments need to know that if they increase and stay at the same rate, that the citizen property tax is going to increase more than that percentage rate. So they have to consider that property taxes, they are really assessing property taxes. So even though they want certain things or need certain things, all the other capital projects and stuff, people, they want certain things, but we can't get it all at the same time because we don't want to put the burden on the citizen at the same time. So that's mainly my point about this. So I know we are not going to fix it today, but the system as it is. I've asked the administration, the last one and this one, they ever, bring something back that would say, is there a different way to do it? But this is a system that we have, so we must monitor and do this system the best that we can to have the least impact on the citizens as the property rates go. That's it.
Okay. We will move along.
That will go out. It may, I need to revise it a little bit to add some prior year, maybe some percentages so they can see it. But what I was anticipating to show is what their current rate would give at the new estimated value and then what the revenue neutral. But I can also include the prior year information as well so they can see that and see there is growth with a revenue neutral and reassess their budget, what they provided. And hopefully that will help the situation and give them some more information. But if there's other than direct email, if there's a quicker way, let me know because I know they need to get this information and we want to have it back. So we want to help them out as much as possible.
I think what the manager stated about revising this and what you got is going to work. The email, I don't know all these guys, but we may want to have Mr. Cameron to follow up with a phone call, make sure they know they've got that email and deal with it in a timely manner. Thank you.
Okay. All right. The next item on the agenda is the COLA, cost of living adjustment recommendation, and currently, the budget that's in process has a 5% COLA built in for county employees, and that calculation is $2,660,331. We also will share that in all of the departmental budgets and all of the salary line items, every position is represented in those salary line items.
Would you get that number again, please?
$2,660,331.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
And we will revisit this when we go through salary studies, potentially.
We can
Okay.
talk about it anytime.
Thank you.
But as you can see, that's a 5%. With that figure, you can see that each percent is just over $500,000.
Correct.
Yeah. 532,000 per percent.
Is that engineering figures or finance figures?
Engineering will be 532, 6620.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. That is actually the last item that we had planned to cover today. I do have our materials for tomorrow with me, and so we would like to keep moving through our agenda that we have. You don't want to? What are you looking at me like that for?
Because you're speaking.
We would like to continue to move along with the items that we need to cover. So if we can take a break and I can get the next set of materials in front of you, we can keep pushing through unless there's any objections.
Help me out of that.
Yeah, it's just 1:30. Let's try to come back in about 10 minutes, 1:45.
Call us back to order at this time. The manager really wants to do that, so we'll let her do that tomorrow.
All right. So I've passed some materials out. You've got some more handouts in front of you. I do apologize. This morning was a little bit of a train wreck for me. So you also have this sheet of paper in front of you, which was the calculation for the revenue neutral rate that Donna was referring to at the beginning of our day, and you did not have it, and I apologize for that. But you had it in your book from our small budget meetings. So we will move into our day 2 materials, and the first item that we're going to talk about is positions. And so I've made mention of us not funding any positions, and what I'm speaking of are the ones that you see up on the screen and that are in your handouts. The 2 positions that were requested in MIS, the 2 positions that were requested in emergency services, the 1 position requested in human resources, and the 5 positions requested in social services. So all of these department heads are aware that the positions that they have requested are not currently funded in the budget that we're working with today. I will say, I did talk with Ms. DeVega about those positions in social services, and she is completely on board with the philosophy of just taking time to dig in this year and see what she has to work with, what the current vacancies are, positions that have already been requested and provided prior to her being with us, so that she can really take a full assessment of the agency's needs. And as a matter of fact, with one of those positions, I think one was a administrative assistant. I think you all have heard before, there is no administrative assistant assigned to administration in that department. And now we have a director and 2 deputy director positions. She was able to pull someone from another area that had some capacity and has really good skill set to be able to help administration out. So she's already starting to, get creative with the existing resources and taking a look at what positions she currently has to work with. So currently, there are none of these positions funded in the budget, but these 2 are. So we talked a little bit about the need to backfill our Public Utilities and Facilities Director position. That was with the movement of Jonathan Boone into our Deputy County Manager position. He's been quite overworked this year, and we want to fill that director position. And that would be the addition of that position. And then with our safety and security officer, we spoke in our small budget sessions about the current way that we're providing security services in the building and our future vision that we're still trying to work towards as far as locking down the front of the building and having everyone enter the building at the back where we have the security station set up. We were asked to look into pricing a weapons detector versus just the metal detector, so we're looking into that. But what we want to do is shift money that we're currently using in professional services to hire outside resources, to shift those funds to fund a full-time position and some part-time help, because we have a lot of after-hours programs and we don't have any coverage for that. We have, the building actually opens up, is unlocked at 7:30 in the morning, and then of course not everybody gets out right at 5 o'clock, and so we'd like to have coverage the full span of when employees are there, including our after-hour events. And we just need more flexibility with being able to have staffing resources available for that. So that's not necessarily additional funding there. That's just shifting funds from professional services to that position. Are there any questions about those 2?
Both of these other positions are funded in the budget, right? These 2?
They are,
Okay.
correct.
Understand the safety and security officers, so we would see less of who we've been seeing at the front desk, and it would be more of a full-time position sitting there, backfilled with some part-time positions.
Correct.
Is that what we're seeing?
Correct. And then us moving forward with making the flow of traffic work the way that it's intended to work, with the entrance and the exit, that front elevator only being used for exiting
Right.
down traffic unless someone with a disability or a need, the person at that front desk would have the ability to make it operational, and then bring them through the security and back to the second elevator.
I think that'd be a great move. If you look at our capital improvement plan that we've got for the next current year, which is where it's so heavily loaded, I don't know how you cannot do what you got in the first position up there, because it's going to be, that's a lot of stuff for somebody to keep up with.
Yes.
So I guess, well, I don't even need to know that, it's none of my business, but I agree you need to have that position for sure.
Right. And two, I mean, you all know that we were able to benefit from a number of state-directed grants. So in addition to the projects that we need to make decisions about as far as funding and, financing, we have funds waiting for us to do some pretty big projects. So we definitely need the staff to help manage those projects.
I agree with you about 500%.
Okay, great. I like that. Are there any questions? Okay. So our next item is about the fee schedule, and you have a couple of handouts in front of you. I know Mr. Hill is going to be coming to join us to talk about the environmental health fees. So if you'll go ahead and skip to probably the last piece of paper that you have for the utilities department. And I will turn it over to Jonathan Boone.
All right, thank you. So you may have recalled during our small group meetings back in March, you know, I indicated that I had been in contact with the city of Rocky Mount, who provides our treated water for both the Central Nash and Northern Nash water system, and also treats the wastewater from both of those systems as well. And they are in the second year of a multi-year plan to address some of their capital needs through their utility rates. And they have indicated their intention, or the Water Resources Director has indicated his intention to request that the city increase their water rates 7.5% and their wastewater rates 8.5% in the FY25 budget. So what you will see here is I have basically mirrored that increase in our wholesale costs, so to purchase the water and to treat the wastewater. And you see those revised rates there. Sorry, they do not show. Yes, they do. So you can see our current water rates. Base rate does not change either for water or sewer customers. First 3 gallons of water would increase from $6.55 per 1,000 gallons to $7.45. So that's not exactly, so on the water side, that's not a 7.5% increase because of how, in terms of the customer will not see a 7.5% increase because we've got the base rate and then we've got a consumption rate. So if, sorry if we had this on the sheet and I can run some quick numbers. I have it in my budget notebook that is in my vehicle. What that would mean for a customer that uses an average of 5,000 gallons a month. What I'm trying to convey to you is that would not equate to a 7.5% increase because the increase is only on the consumption side. It does not affect the base rate. And by and large, a utility customer that uses 5,000 gallons a month, about half of their monthly charge is the base rate and half is consumption. But again, I've reflected that increase in the wholesale costs for our water and for our wastewater in these fees. So with that said, I'll be glad to answer any questions you have about at least the recommended increase for our water and sewer customers. Okay. The third item there is, again, just showing that same increase for our, we have a rate for customers that purchasing bulk water, either in farming operations or maybe filling a pool. And you can see that I'm basically recommending that we increase that rate 45 cents from $6.55 to $7 per 1,000 gallons, and that would just be 7,000 gallons. It's not an incremental increasing fee or escalating fee. It's basically 7 per 1,000, and that's equivalent to the lowest rate for residential or either commercial water customer today. So again, I've carried that through. And then connection fees, the last item in the table, recommend a slight increase, and that's primarily based on increase in our material cost and our contracted cost to install water and sewer taps. You can see an increase of $50, so for $1,200 for a 3/4 inch tap to $1,250, 1 inch tap $1,350 to $1,400, and then greater than 1 inch we still will keep the same approach. We'll basically get a quote for that work and then we'll add 10%, so it'll be 10% more than the county cost for any taps larger than 1 inch. Yes, ma'am.
How do our rates compare for pool, sprinkler, farming, irrigation, those rates? $7 per 1,000 gallon when you're talking about irrigation water and, you know, filling up tanks and trucks and pools seems kind of high.
I do not have bulk rates from other communities in front of me. I could pull that information. You may recall, and we don't have that information in front of us either today, at the meeting in May, When Mike Tolson was with us, he had shared some data from other communities as far as our residential commercial rates, but that did not have bulk rates in it either. But I'll be glad to research that for you and get it to you.
And in my previous years working at the city, we had a rate that reduced itself as you use more, where now we have a rate that increases as you use more. Was that change in philosophy a water conservation issue, or why is it like that now?
Yeah, most communities have an escalating rate with consumption.
But it hadn't always been that way.
And some of that, I think, came about as conservation became more of an issue and a concern, because there's only, the resource is what the resource is, and with City Rocky Mount, it's primarily the Tar River Reservoir, and what the amount of water that's in that basin. So communities have become much more cognizant of the need to be aware of conservation, promote conservation. Of course, we've got, mechanisms, our ordinance, as the city does, when we get into water conservation. We have a drought, we've got levers we can pull that even escalate rates further to encourage conservation. But yes, that's primarily what you see here. Most rate structures, you're going to see an escalating rate as you use more water for residential and commercial. You'll see maybe a different philosophy for industrial rates, and I don't have industrial rates here because I'm not recommending a change. But you may have a declining bulk rate for industry, but typically for residential and commercial, you're going to see increasing tiers.
That's the norm now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about recommended fee increases in the water and sewer utility? And the other thought I would say, and the questions come up, what if we don't do this year? Well, again, the city has kind of sent the signal, and this was even a topic of conversation during my past life, that this is going to be at least a 4 or 5 year process for them. So if we do not increase fees this year to address the fee increase, it's likely I will coming back to you next year with another 7.5% increase in water, 8.5% increase in sewer, and we'll have to address the fees to make up for what we don't do this year if we elect not to move forward with this recommendation, and what we need to do next year to address the third phase of the fee increases that the city is anticipated to implement.
Makes you say we don't have a choice.
We have a choice, but to not increase our fees this year will
choice.
make it much more difficult
Right.
next year.
Understood.
Take it 1 year at a time.
I think you always, if you, wholesale rate goes up, you got to adjust it every time it does.
Right. Now, well, correct. And where we are today, buying all our water,
Understood.
when the fees go up, our costs go up.
Yep.
Okay. We'll turn it over to Mr. Hill when he gets in the room to talk about the environmental health fees as well as solid waste. So I will just skip ahead real quick, and the last slide here is about just kind of addressing the fact that we have said since the start of the day that the current budget that we're working with has been cut in many areas. And so I just wanted to provide the board with our thoughts as far as if there were any additional capacity, what the priorities would be. And so we have prioritized the 3 positions that are up there before you, one being the HR technician, one of the positions for MIS, and then in DSS, a paralegal for the legal department in that agency. And then under capital, additional vehicle request needs that will be going unmet. We have looked at seeing what we can do there, as well as technology. And technology is so high. Again, I think I may have mentioned the tough books. So Windows 10 is what's going out. I think our operational systems are no longer going to have support, and we have to upgrade our tough books in public safety, both in the sheriff's office and in emergency services. And again, those are $4,000 apiece. And so there's a significant amount of money needed to replace those, as well as some additional radio, the TDMA Viper radio upgrades, as we continue year after year to have radios age out and need to be upgraded. That's going to be an ongoing process, as well as some other technology needs within emergency services with 911 and our radio towers and things like that. So I just thought I'd put that information up there in front of the board as you all have to consider a new tax rate. Yeah.
You may, ma'am.
HR technician, to start that at 60,000, what are the qualifications for that? Is that requiring a degree? Because when I hear the word technician, it almost sounds like just an assistant. Will that person be able to take over? Should the HR director?
No, ma'am, that figure has the salary and all of the benefits.
That's, okay.
So a good 32% of that or so, Donna. About 28 to 32% of that is
And that's the same
benefits.
for the MIS position?
It is.
Okay.
And you can't be a commissioner and an employee at the same time.
I'll take that. Oh, look at it.
Your kid can't work there, so I don't think you work there either.
Well, you can, but we just can't pay you.
Right, we'll be glad for you to come and work. Any questions about that? Has Mr. Hill entered the room yet?
So you're saying that's, if we find additional revenue, that's the administration's first things they'd like to see put back?
Correct.
Is that what this list is?
That is correct.
Okay.
I just need a penny. I just need another penny.
Pennies are hard to come by this day and time.
He's en route.
Oh,
Did,
I just hate to see us get too far behind on our technology. That's,
well, I know our IT department has looked into the Windows situation, and I believe that there's a contract that we can move forward with to continue to get some services, but we're just kicking the ball down the road. I mean, so yeah, I know we've had internal discussions about, a small financing package that would help us to get some more vehicles and get the technology needs taken care of. So as we continue to work through this process, we'll continue to bring what we can to offer to take care of our needs to the board.
we can figure out a way to handle that technology.
well, it should be noted that my Windows 7 still serves me sufficiently,
Well,
honestly.
we can have a discussion about that.
I think Munis will run on Windows 7.
What's that?
Munis will not run on Windows 7.
Right. We have a lot of applications and a lot of departments that have requirements that maybe you don't have.
Well, it might be why I can't read a calendar invite.
That could be.
What, you say a small finance package, why would we not consider it if indeed you think this is, needs that we need now, and with Mr. Outlaw's comment about technology, I fully understand that. Why would we not make that 17 million, 18 million and take care of it?
I don't think we would want to carry this debt out
kind of-
on those terms.
On something of this
Right.
nature? I do understand that.
Right. We would want this to be more of a 4 or 5 year payoff.
Gotcha. Yep, understand that, Joel.
Yeah, I mean, you're not talking about really recurring expense if you're talking about under capital.
Right.
So you could fund that, and it's not going to recur next year or year after. It's going to be several years before you see it again.
Right.
I think it's.
Well, and if you'll recall that, it was 2 ambulance that were requested. That is what our replacement schedule has in place is 2, and we are currently only accommodating for 1. So, and again, with the QRVs, they asked for 2, and we're only taking care of 1. So between technology and vehicles, we could definitely put a package together. Okay.
The vehicle request right here, which vehicles are those?
Those are, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, there are several to choose from.
Right.
We've got an additional QRV, which the manager mentioned, that has not been funded, and there was also a truck that was requested in emergency services. So those two, that would be 2 candidates that would cost right at $150,000.
Well, the other thing I recall, Madam Manager, is in our early meetings back in September with DSS, there was a lot of conversation about undependable vehicles and them having to drive their own cars, et cetera. Have we addressed that sometime since then to now?
I think they have picked up a couple of vehicles this year, and then does have 1 additional in there for them right now. But again, if we were able to put a small financing package together, we could take care of those needs, yeah.
EMS, technology, vehicle, I
Yeah.
think we should at least look at that.
Okay, we will do that. Thank you. I know that makes our deputy county manager happy.
I think I'd be supportive of that.
Yeah, okay, great.
What I particularly remember from the situations that were described about the DSS workers driving their own vehicles and things that happen in vehicles that don't need to happen in their personal vehicle.
That's correct.
I have a sensitivity to that as well.
That's correct. It's a tough spot to be in when you need to transport other folks in your personal vehicle.
Oh, well, we shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. Okay. If you all don't mind, let's just break for about 10 minutes and let him get here so that we can finish this information up. And then the plan to finish out the day would be for us to go ahead and go into closed session for a matter of attorney-client privilege. And then tomorrow, we will meet for some coffee and donuts and talk about the results of our public safety pay study. We're going to call this meeting back to order. And we've got our guest, distinguished guest with us, Mr. Bill Hill.
Oh, I thought you meant somebody was coming before me.
And he's going to make his way to the podium and present some information to you all about environmental health, fee increases that are needed, as well as solid waste.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to come before you. This is certainly a part of the revenue package for the budget that we'll have for proposing for next fiscal year. And the first item, we're dealing with 2 separate sets of fees that I would like to see or propose to increase for next fiscal year. The first section would be in environmental health. And I think you probably have those fees in front of you now. They're showing that with, for example, and let me say this also to preface this discussion, I've got Mr. Eric Cutrell with us to elaborate on some examples of how these fees are administered. And maybe more importantly, the frequency of these fees. Some of these fees are not administered more than once or twice a year. And one of them in particular, I don't think has ever been used. So some of these fees are not. Now, if you take your typical septic tank fee or well permit fee, that's used quite a bit. So you've got a larger factor involved with septic tank fees. But if you look at them And I've got Ms. Lori Boone, who is here to talk with food and lodging, who actually is leading our program, but she's here to give some background to the food and lodging, the permits, pool permits, the plan reviews, those kinds of inspection permits. And I got Ms. Liz Lloyd, also as Deputy Health Director, with us today. So I thank them for coming with me. If you'd like to go down the list, you can see that the first one, we're dealing with a septic tank fee, and I'm proposing, it's been about 10, 12 years. I think we looked at the last amendment in probably around 2012. We've stayed pretty close for the last 7, 8 years to our neighboring counties, but when you also have the survey in your package, you can see that we're getting very close and a little bit off, and I'll talk about those averages. You can see 6 other counties that are listed, but I also have an aggregate or average there too. When we look at the first one, and that's one we have quite a bit, the septic tank fee, $300. I'm requesting that we go up to $400, and that's pretty close to where our other counties are. It's an average right now of $379 if we look at all the other counties. We already know that some counties are going to propose some similar increases like we're doing today. I know Wilson is going to propose an increase to go to $400 on that particular one with septic tanks. And I think Johnston County might have some increases proposed. Their last day or two, just telephone calls to try to find out what they're doing for next year. If you look at another particular one with engineering, they're set. We can't charge any more than that. That's state set. And if you look at what the soil scientist or engineer does, except where we signed the permit at the last, Mr. Cuttrell or his crew will go out and make a final inspection and sign, we can only charge 40%, up to 40% of that septic tank fee. So as you can see, the septic tank fee is $300. We can charge $120. Or if these fees go to $400 for septic tank permits, then we can go up 40% to $160. The reissuance permit, sometimes this will occur when you've got, these permits are good for 5 years, and not too often. I think Mr. Cuttrell told me yesterday, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, 1 or 2 times a year, you'll get a person that's getting close to 5 years. They're at the a month or 2 before they're going to expire. You can get a reissuance on that. They have to go out and check to see if anything's changed with soil or any kind of construction taking place. But the reissuance is $100, and we're recommending, I believe we stay at $100 on that one. The average on that looks like $156 if we look at the other 5 or 6 counties. Upgrades would be another one that we looked at. Pretty much somebody is got an existing septic tank system and they want to add a bedroom to the house. That's a typical example. Correct, Mr. Cuttrell? Okay. You're adding a bedroom to the house and you need to make a revision. You know, septic tank sizes are based on the number of bedrooms. So if you add a bedroom, you've got to modify that system. Might have to add another nitrification line or do some other modifications. Here we've got, for an upgrade, we're requesting to go from 100 to 175. Looks like the average is around $187 when we look at other counties' current fees. When you look at compliance, that's just simply going out to make sure things are compliant. When you're going to look at an existing system, make sure there's no surface sewage existing, and it looks like everything is working properly. The next one, MHP, stands for Mobile Home Park, and that's pretty much, we are requesting to go from 50 to 100. That's a change out. You got somebody that's got a single wide, and they're changing out to a brand new single wide. We have to go out there and make sure that system's working right. They put it in the same place, that kind of thing. And that's what that one represents. Not too many of those a year, are there, Mr. Cuttrell? Right, many, a fair number of those? Okay. And they're usually single wides for single wides. They always trade outs for single wides for single wides. If it were a double wide, they'd make a difference.
The county still has several mobile home parks throughout the county. I think they're kind of transitioned in the last 5-10 years away from mobile home parks, but there's still several within the county we have to go through when they do a change.
Okay, we're still under your section when we get to well permits. We currently charge $250. They usually go hand in glove when you get a septic tank permit, unless you got some Mr. Boone's municipal water, and then you don't have to have a well permit. But in this case, if you do, we have $250. This requires quite a number of visits sometimes. You go out and site 4 visits sometimes. You go out and site where the well's going to be. You certainly want to keep it off the property line. You want to keep it at least 50 feet. I prefer 100 feet from the septic tank nearest line. And you would need to go back out and do a final inspection, grouting inspection on that well. Then you would need to go out later and do a water sample, where you make sure if the chlorine's out of the water, you don't want to mask it, make sure they get a good water sample. So there are 3 or 4 visits involved. Recommending here we go from $250 to $350. Looks like the average in our surrounding counties currently is around $327 without increases next year with these counties. Just keep in mind, an agricultural well and a residential well are the same for us. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Category, I'd just like to understand something, and I'm going to use the septic tank permit as an example. We'd be going to $400. Looking at how many septic tank permits would be done by one of our environmental scientists per day, can we justify that we have a cost of $400 for that septic tank permit?
Yes, sir, I think we can. And I'll say this, when you put the time involved in the office with the paperwork, with the travel expense involved, and with going out there to the property, not just with the comparison of other counties, I think, now I will be the first to say we have not done a real close-knit cost analysis, unit cost on that, but I do think it would be very close. As a matter of fact, I would think our cost probably would exceed that if you look at all the time that would go into it. Now, so many times you go out and you're getting a new septic tank permit request. The first visit might be, hey, you got to cut down a lot of this stuff, the growth, before we can come back and really do it. The next visit might be, hey, you didn't even give us the 4 corners on the lot. We need to know the lot size. We need to know the 4 corners on the house. We need it surveyed. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. To tell you this actual cost, I really think it probably would be below cost. You have a thought on that, Mr. Kuchel?
Absolutely. Sometimes we make numerous trips to the lot before we actually get to the point where we're ready to actually sign off on the final construction permit where they can get a permit. A lot of different factors go involved in that. Going back, like you said, when you first get there, you know, sometimes they might just need to meet and try to discuss what they want to do. Because sometimes trying to understand what they want to do off the site plan might be a little bit difficult. So you might have to make several trips out there just to get there, what they want to do, and then several trips back to the property. Okay, we need to get the property lines marked, get everything established, get, you know, well, we're to the point we're ready to start construction. So there's might be several trips out there. Now, when we get into a subdivision, sometimes everything is cookie cutter. We'll admit, when you get in these big subdivisions with these big buildings, everybody's they're building these tract homes where these spec houses, everything is, you know, a cookie cutter type deal. You can go out there and, you know, they might not take as long as you do as you would if you were with an individual.
But if we got quizzed about it, you think we could justify the $400 cost involved?
I think so, yes, sir.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
And I think I'll add another point here. We count on about $195,000 to $198,000 a year. That's what we budget next year for these fees, current fees, without an increase. $195,000 to $198,000. I think it's $198,000 in the budget for next year. This won't alter the budget if you don't approve increasing these fees. But what it will make a difference on is the local appropriation that goes into the budget. In other words, we're counting on $195,000 if fees don't increase and we're about the same level of building activity in the county. We can count on $198,000 again next year. We did $235,000 the year before last. But having said that, If you increase these fees, I'm estimating you can count on $250,000. So instead of 198, probably at least 250,000, and that means 50,000 less will come from local appropriation. It really won't affect the budget unless you cut something out. The expenditure budget stays the same, but the revenue would substitute every dollar for local appropriation.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Well permits, I think we were talking about agricultural bacterial. We do those in our own lab. That's a very common sort of thing. We see our guys traipsing in all the time to our lab, go out and get a small water sample. But we don't allow you to take the water. We have to go out and make sure we sterilize that outside faucet, either with running it off for 5 minutes and sometimes flaming the outside faucet, that sort of thing. But that is a bacterial only. When you hear of coliform, tolocoliform, fecal coliform, that's what we're detecting in that. We're charging $35, and the average in our county is $76 currently recommending, and it does look like a big increase when you start doubling fees, but that is a double up to $70. Pesticides, herbicides, and petroleum, they're all large volume samples that have to be sent to the state lab. We don't test anything except the bacterial, the small water samples. And we're recommending there that we go up from $100 to $125 on those. Nitrates, we're at $45. The average looks like it's around $75. Occasionally we'll get a typical situation will be with a new couple who just had a baby. And you really want to make sure nitrate levels are not higher in that water supply. It will sometimes cause a syndrome called blue baby syndrome. And so you want to make sure your nitrates are not too high in that particular. So families get concerned. The pediatrician tells them probably check for nitrates. We don't want to see a situation that's deleterious to the child. Inorganic panel, that is the full panel, and currently we have $140 on that. The average looks like $147, recommending increasing to $200. Mr. Kuchar, we're talking about for the panel, what, 16, 17, 18 different samples?
Yes, sir.
At least that. Sometimes folks want iron checked. Do you get that very much? I know folks, that's more of a nuisance probably, where the clothes are coming out and they're looking dingy rather than white. That's a check. Do you get that very much, iron check?
Iron, lead.
Yeah, and you can filter those things out with a filtration system on your well. Sulfur, every once in a while you get a sulfur check on it, and we're recommending going from 55 to 80. Average is 74. If you'd like, I'll move into the food and lodging fees, and I have Ms. Laurie Boone, who's primarily involved in that section. She's overall supervisor of the program, but she's primarily involved in this area. If we look at a plan review, now a plan review gets to be pretty complicated, even though she told me yesterday the pool plan review is much more complicated than the restaurant most of the time. But the plan review is to sit down with an owner of a prospective a restaurant and sit down and talk about how this needs to be organized. Here's the way your kitchen needs to look. Your hand washing sink needs to be on the opposite wall than your vegetable washing sink. All these kind of epoxy paints and light colored paints and the different kinds of things that you have to do to meet the state requirements. And again, depending on the menu, she'll want to know what the menu is, how complex the menu is, rather than just a hot dog stand. Plan review would then have to be approved. Now, when we talk about our chain restaurants like Hardee's, McDonald's, Smithfield's, those go to the state and then just come back to us. But they are actually approved, your chain restaurants, by the state. And they're pretty automatic. Hardee's has a pretty, and McDonald's and all these chains have an automatic system where they send in basically the same kind of plan review on these. But I'm recommending that we would go up from 200 to 250. Looks like the average on that is $241.67. So $240 is about an average with current, with looking at our county, different plans, different counties. Pool plan review. That gets to be pretty involved with, again, residential pools don't have to be inspected, but all the hotel pools do, the country clubs do, the apartment complexes do, number of pools out there. We've often said we often get this rush coming up around Memorial Day, about a week or two before Memorial Day, everybody gets excited about opening their pool. And that's not a plan review for those reopening and renewing. I'll get to that in just a minute. But a new pool would involve sitting down and talking with them about the deep end. If you got a diving board, how low that diving board needs to be on the depth, determined by the depth of the water. A belt, a rope across, dividing the deep end from the shallow end, lettering on the side, lighting, emergency telephone, first aid kit, those kinds of things have to be in the plan. A pool permit is required every year. That's recommending that we go from just $195 to $200. Average, when we look at a pool permit, is $187. Pool permit is what we talk about every Memorial Day when you opening pool. Every pool has to be permitted every year to open. So without a permit, and they're looking for everything from the pH levels, the chemical level in the pools that kill bacteria, to the different lettering and emergency phones, first aid kits, all the things that have to be in compliance. A visit is made on that permit. A visit has to be literally made to that pool. And usually they will follow up probably somewhere in the mid-season, summer, to check on their logs that they have to keep on a daily basis, showing the pH and chemical level, probably. The next one's tattoo permits, and we're looking at proposing $140 to $200. That's a yearly permit to Ms. Boone, and that goes with the artist, the tattoo artist. Each artist has to have a permit in their specific location. Right. You got to make sure, they go out and make sure all that needles and stuff are sterile, their sterile protocol is in check, and those kinds of things that they're doing to make sure that, to the best of our knowledge, we don't get a spread of a disease like hepatitis or something like that. Temporary food permits, we can't regulate that. That's a state-regulated fee of $75, staying at $75. A limited food permit stays at $75, and that's regulated by the state also. I believe that completes the environmental proposed fee increases for next year.
Would you give us a description of a temporary food permit and a limited food permit?
Okay. Ms. Boone, you want to talk about like the Blooming Festival a little bit?
A temporary permit is in conjunction with a fair, festival, carnival. So for instance, the Blooming Festival, they have to pay the $75 application fee. We actually go out the day of the event and make sure that they meet all of our rules. And we issue that permit for the length of the event. A limited food service permit is a concession stand, like at a high school or middle school, your football games, basketball games, things like that. That has to be in conjunction with an amateur athletic event. And that's the $75 application fee. We go out, make sure you have what you need to have, and that permit's good for a year.
Does that mean that the Blooming Festival, each one of those concession stands has to have that permit each time they come there?
If they are serving something that is regulated by the health department, yes. For instance, like snow cones are not regulated by the health department, so they wouldn't have to have that permit. But anybody selling hot dogs, hamburgers, things like that would.
So they get that permit multiple times a year?
Yes. For each event.
Can you tell us where food trucks fall in this scenario?
Food trucks are inspected just like restaurants. So if somebody wants to start one, they also have to go through the plan review process.
What's the frequency for checking those food trucks?
Food trucks are, once they're permitted, they're inspected twice a year.
Twice a year. Do these food trucks have procedures for hand washing?
Yes, they have to have all commercial restaurant equipment, hot and cold water. We inspect them exactly like a restaurant, it's just, on a much smaller scale.
Are normal restaurants checked twice a year?
Depending on their menus, anywhere from either 2 or 3 times a year, but we also do educational visits, verification visits when something's wrong. We follow up to make sure it's been corrected. So we're in a restaurant maybe, it can be 6, 7 times a year, just depending on what's going on.
Do you have more problems with restaurants, stationary restaurants, or food trucks?
Food trucks are a problem because they move. And once you're permitted in North Carolina, you can travel to any other county to operate as long as you notify that health department in that county. But the problem is tracking those folks down sometimes to do an inspection.
So the increase in the problems with the food truck does not increase the frequency of
Right.
requiring checks?
Right, but we, again, if we go in and they're having a temperature issue, we have to follow back up on that. It's not something that we just let go. We follow up within 72 hours on issues like that, within 10 days on less important issues.
Yeah, I just want to, I've had people ask me about food trucks.
Right.
It seems they should be checked more frequently than you think, but maybe not.
Well, Lord, the food truck that goes to the Blues Festival, how does that work?
Okay, so if a food truck has to have a commissary, and if a food truck can go to the commissary prior to the event and then after the event, they don't have to get that temporary permit. But when you run into events that are lasting, 3, 4, or 5 days, or the state fair that lasts 2 weeks, they have to get a temporary permit to operate.
But that food truck has to come out of a permitted restaurant, correct?
Yes,
All food trucks come out of a permitted restaurant?
well, they have commissaries where they can prep food,
Sure.
empty their wastewater, fill up their freshwater tank. It's not necessarily associated with the restaurant itself.
Do we have any commissaries in Nash County?
We have restaurants that serve as commissaries, but not not just a commissary. Some of the bigger counties have those.
What does that mean? Does it say a food truck has to get their food out of a restaurant?
Well, we have to know where their food's coming from. We have to know where they are filling up their freshwater tank, emptying their wastewater tank,
So
things like that.
if I've got a
Supplies.
food truck and I want to serve hot dogs, I can't just go buy the hot dog, the buns, the condiments, and just buy it from a supply store and just do my own thing?
You would have to be permitted.
I know I'd have to be permitted, but I don't have to go through a restaurant to do that.
There are instances where you can be permitted without a commissary, but you have to show proof that you have somewhere to get your fresh water from, empty your wastewater. There's a lot of stipulations there.
Okay.
How about the typical high school, where they serve hot dogs?
That's your limited food service that we permit one time a year. They are not required to have all commercial equipment like a restaurant, but we still do inspections on them while they operate. So depending on, say it's, a baseball concession stand, we go out for the permitting process, but then we go back again during baseball season and do an inspection.
Yeah. And if you bring prepackaged foods in, like a prepackaged hot dog,
Right.
and you let the person microwave it themselves, you do not have to have a permit.
Correct. Some concession stands will get, the Chick-fil-A sandwiches already pre-wrapped, ready to sell, or the individual pizzas that they don't have to do anything else to. They're not warming, they're not adding any condiments to anything, and they don't have to have a permit to do that.
And our concession stand at our parks in Nash County, they are limited.
Yes, sir. Limited food service permits.
Just to give you a feel, we've collected in revenue in these fees through today, or maybe yesterday or today, $132,800. So we're running a little short, except we usually peak out, as I said before, year before last, we hit 220-some thousand in revenue in these fees. Last year, about 198,000. The last 2 months of the fiscal year really starts to peak. You get more activity, not with food necessarily, but with septic tanks and folks building homes and that kind of thing. We're at 132,000 now, but we got 2.5 more months to get up to 195,000 to meet the budget.
That from this whole sheet.
Sir?
That's the revenue off in the whole sheet we're looking at.
That's right. Mr. Q?
Also, we had looked at that while ago, yesterday afternoon, Mr. You left. The last time our fees were increased was in 2008, and we done an amendment of some water samples and some plan review in 2014.
Yeah, I thought it was about 10 years ago, the last time we did the amendment. And we've stayed pretty close with our surrounding counties up to the last year or so. If you want to move on, I'll move on to the solid waste tipping fees.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me just say, tipping fees, we originally thought about proposing a $10 increase last year from 48 to 58, or if it's yard waste, you don't have that $2 tax, it'd been 46 to 56. But we later revised that to $5 increase. That $5 increase took us from 46 to 51 on the yard waste, and really 51 on the C&D, because $2 up to 53. But for the consumer coming in, the C&D, $53 a ton. $2 goes to taxes. If you look at our transfer stations around us too, that we send waste to from our convenience centers, Rocky Mount goes up every year, and currently they're at $70.75 a ton for the transfer station, Rocky Mount. They'll go up another $1.50 or so come July 1. I'll get a letter, or maybe Jonathan Boone will get the letter, that's going up for July 1. GFL in Wilson's transfer station, we've compromised, we have worked with them and negotiated a better tipping fee because we do so much business with GFL, with containers. We do $800,000 worth of business with them a year with GFL, with our container haul contract, right at $780,000 to $800,000. So we've negotiated a $61.33 for a tipping fee that would go to Wilson. So by that, all Stony Hill waste would go to Wilson. And a lot of Strickland's Convenience Center will go to Wilson. Some of Vic's site on Highway 58 goes to Wilson. But as you get into the northern area, probably northern Nash, Old Carriage Road, and get up in Drake and get into that Salem area, all that goes into the city of Rocky Mount, where we pay $70.75. What we're trying to do is get our tipping fees a little more in line with what we're paying out for waste that goes for waste disposal from our convenience centers. Again, at our landfill, we can only take C&D. We do take our C&D from convenience centers. We do take the yard waste from convenience centers. But the other would be a charge of $51 and $43. So $5. Right now, we're at $597,000 in money, $597,852, nearly at $600,000. We're at right now today. We budgeted $556, so we're going to be way over budget in revenue, which is a good thing. We projected we would collect $575,000. I'm going to tell you, if we're already at $600,000, we've got 2.5 months, we're going to probably collect closer to $710,000 if things will stay as they are. We budgeted next year $609,000 for tipping fees. I figured that we do about 13,000 tons a year. We used to figure 10, 11, but this year it looks like it's going to be, we're already at 11, 1 or 2. We're going to do about 13,000 if things stay as they are, 13,000 tons. So if you increase tipping fees by $5, you're basically going to increase your revenue by $65,000. Not a lot, but it will take a fee from $609,000, which really is a very conservative revenue figure. I think it would really be more in the $700,000 category. It would take you up to $750,000 in revenue from tipping fees. So the recommendation is that we increase tipping fees at the landfill from the current rate, another $5 this year, as was done last year, for fiscal year 2025. Any questions from?
Statements?
I'm not gonna do it again. Just
Okay.
quit looking at me.
Okay,
And, the water sampling is upon request, so the state doesn't require sampling
Well,
for chemicals.
Well, the state does not require a sample, and let me tell you something else about water sample. Now, if you have a bad septic tank, you have to get it fixed. You have to repair it. If you have a bad water collection sample, you can continue to drink that water. Correct, Mr. Kittrell? We can't force you to correct that. In other words, now, if you've got a municipal well, if you serve in more than one place, like an apartment or some park, a mobile home park with the well, you've got to be in compliance. What were you going to add to that, Mr. Kittrell?
The state, for all new well permits, the state does require bacteria to do the well panel kit, bacteria, inorganics, and nitrates.
And that all goes into the well permit fee.
$350.
When you pay that fee, that includes the full sample. But yes, if you're just out there with a well, you've had it 5 or 10 years, 20 years, and you say, I'd like to check it for bacterial, yeah, we can go out and get a water sample and check it. If it's bad, you can continue to drink it, but we advise you to chlorinate the well.
Seems like it ought to be, state ought to require it. And I'll say while I believe it should be, these chemicals, a lot of them contribute to cancer. And more people are having cancer than medical bills are higher.
Well, you've been reading a lot about the excuse me.
It's a good possibility if they required it and it's done, you could save medical bills, which would cut down on the health care. It would help the individual as well as the insurance companies.
And you're going to see and hear a lot more about PFAS chemicals that, in the lower Cape Fear.
See more contamination too now with the chemicals we use in agriculture and not only in agriculture, landscaping, and you can just go on and name it.
Yes, sir. Folks that live near farms where you have sprays and chemicals and herbicides and pesticides often will want their wells checked see if they've got a pesticide contamination there. Yes, sir.
Well, still, a number of years ago, neighboring county Halifax chose to build their own transfer station. And there was a reason for them doing that, I guess. And are you familiar with it enough to know that turn out in good favor of the county? And should that be something we consider moving forward?
I looked at those figures yesterday, and it was unbelievable.
How did you know I was going to ask that question today?
I didn't know, but I was curious myself. And when you look at a transfer station, and this is going to be hard to believe, you're talking about $4 million plus for a transfer station. The machinery involved, the maintenance involved, and when we looked at the city of Rocky Mount, we actually said how much. Now, one thing you have more control. You do have control. You set your own fees. But with the city of Rocky Mount probably charging $71 or so, you would have to think about the capital outlay. I would say, from the figures I looked at, were 3 or 4 years old, were exceeding $4 million on the transfer station. I think the real question comes, do you then want to become a regional area to take waste and have a host fee for Nash County? A lot of times in the past when I've talked with this Board of Commissioners, we don't want to take other counties' waste in Nash County. But there's a real advantage, like in Bertie County. They serve as a host county for that landfill, and they get a real good revenue source coming in from other counties. They get that host fee reduction. But transfer stations are very expensive. Jonathan Boone was telling me just the other day that I think Rocky Mount built theirs for practically nothing.
Well, I can tell you Halifax, because we built it for, didn't spend near $4 million, but it's been a number of years ago, but they only handle Halifax waste, but they did it at the time when they went to countywide collection system. And they did away pretty much with their convenience centers, so they made a swap there. I just wonder how that's worked out for them.
Yeah, hadn't Halifax got some of both convenience centers and road and curbside pickup?
They have total curbside pickup countywide, but they did retain several of their convenience centers, but they're only open like 1 day a week.
Right.
Maybe 2 days a week.
When we looked at curbside several years ago, instead of being $125 a year for using convenience centers 6 days a week, anytime you want to use them, it would just about double the cost we thought of, probably around $250, $300 a year it might cost the average citizen for curbside. It may be worth that, but it looked like a double at the time.
I would say it leaves you with a very unsightly county when you do that, because many of the containers do not get moved year-round. So that would be something I would certainly want to consider, but I don't know how that transfer station turned out. It's just a curiosity that I've got versus convenience centers.
Yeah. When we built those 9 convenience centers years ago, the first one we built was in Stony Hill, and that was probably 35 years ago, I guess.
Right.
We built 9, and after we built them over the last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years probably, we said that 90 to 95% of our population was within 5 miles of a convenience center. It's never been true in Westmount, Mr. Outlaw, and that's why we're looking at that 10th convenience center for $1.5 million, somewhere like that, with the property and the convenience center. I've also looked at the operational cost for a new convenience center, and I think I was looking at some old figures the other day, 3 or 4 years old. Best case scenario, somewhere around $130,000, $140,000 a year to maybe $180,000 a year that operational costs would be. Your staff costs would be about $35,000 at $12 and some change an hour. When I looked at it years ago, it was $10 an hour. But your cost of hauling, it's hard to figure. When you add the extra hauls, like 60-some at the Vic site a month, but if you look at 60-some for a new 10th convenience center site, you're probably taking away some, though, at the Vic site. You're going to have fewer hauls at the Vic site. Maybe even as far as Nash Tech, but at least the Vic site. But what I think you're going to also have to factor in, there are a lot of folks out in your area, in the Westmount area, that have private collection. They might start to think, hey, I've got a convenience center only a mile away. I go by it 3 or 4 times a week. Why am I paying a private haul? I think I'll start using a convenience center. So you might generate a little more waste from that factor alone.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Hill? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time and your staff. Thank you. Closed session? Yeah. Yes. So I'm going to turn it back over to Chairman so that we can move into closed session.
I'd ask for, well, I really don't need to ask for that motion, but we're going to recess our regular session for today and take back up in the morning. We have one item that we need to tend to today or tomorrow, one we've chosen to do it today that should be done in closed session, so we'll take just a 5-minute pause to allow the visitors to vacate the room, then we can stay right here in this room, and we do not expect any action to be taken in closed session, so therefore there will not be anything to report after this. So with that said, I will close the recess the meeting officially after the closed session. So if you'll just take a short pause. We would indeed. I'd entertain Commissioner Outlaw entertain a motion at this time to go into closed session.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Outlaw. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Commissioner Ayrton. Questions on the motion? All in favor of that motion, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by a like sign? We will convene in closed session in just about 3 or 4 minutes.